Welcome everyone to my PowerPoint about Discard Warlock, the worst designed archetype in all of Hearthstone. Now, talking about poorly designed cards isn't just about talking about overpowered cards. We have to talk about how actually terribly designed Discard Warlock is for a second. So, Discard Warlock is all about having a secondary resource in getting more powerful effects. The issue is for a long time, that was terrible. The reason Discard Warlock is good nowadays is that there are good cards that want to be discarded. In the past, you didn't have cards that were good and wanted to be discarded. You had cards like High Priest Jeklik and Clutch Mother Zavis. Jeklik is, of course, a 4-mana 3/5 taunt lifesteal. When you discard this, add 2 copies to your hand. And Clutch Mother Zavis, a 2-mana 2/2 beast. Whenever you discard this, give it +2/+2 and return it to your hand. So, you can kind of start to see why Discard Warlock is bad. Of course, there have been cards that are good that wanted to be discarded. We'll get to those in a little bit. I think it's on the third slide. But yeah, and then the payoff cards for discarded cards have been always terrible. Lakari Sacrifice is the 1-mana Ungoro quest. Quest, discard 6 cards. Reward, open the Nether Portal. And Nether Portal is a 5-mana spell that, at the end of your turns, summon 2 3/2 imps. So you get a permanent dormant thing that takes up a spot on your board to get 2 3/2 imps at the end of your turn. They don't have taunt like the Sargeras Portal. Like, what? And then Blood Queen Lanethel, 5-mana 1/6 undead, lifesteal, has +1 attack for each card you've discarded this game. So the thing about discard is it is a secondary resource to be getting rid of cards in your hand for potentially a benefit of a more powerful card or cards wanting to be discarded to activate their effects. But they were terrible for a long time. Discard Warlock wasn't really, like, worth anything in Wild. I mean, like, the earliest I would say that it was worthwhile to play Discard Warlock in Wild was in 2020. So 6 years after the first discard cards were added to the game. 2020 brought in Ashes of Outlands, which actually added a lot of really powerful cards to Discard Warlock. And I don't think that that's that hot of a take to say that it was about 2020 where Discard Warlock started to become a real competent archetype, and it was relatively decent, right? But it's nothing in comparison to what it was in 2023. So let's look at some of the broken cards. I'm not going to show the pre-nerf versions for cards. I just don't like doing it. They look weird. Hearth cards is awkward. But let's start with Malchezaar's Imp. Malchezaar's Imp is a 1-mana 1/3 demon. Whenever you discard a card, draw a card. Malchezaar's Imp has consistently been one of the best 1-mana minions ever. And although it wasn't really useful for a long time, you can't really say that it wasn't broken on paper. And I mean, we've obviously seen that, now that there have been good discard cards to surround it, like cards like Cataclysm. Cataclysm is another card that was considered terrible. It used to be a 4-mana spell, destroy all minions, discard your whole hand. Yeah, it was really bad for a long time. Initially, you were supposed to use it with the Lakari Sacrifice quest, and obviously that was terrible. But as cards came out, Soul Barrage, it became more powerful. Chamber of Viscidius used to be a 2-mana 3 durability location. Now it is a 3-mana 2 durability location. Cataclysm now is 5 mana and only discards 2 cards. And it reads, look at 3 cards in your hand and choose one to discard, draw 2 cards. So you get to pick which card you're discarding, which is one of the downsides of discard, is that, typically they say discard a random card. And discarding a random card can hit cards that don't want to be discarded. But Chamber, nope. You get to pick which card you lose. You get to draw a lot of cards. And at one point, Chamber had a 90% win rate in the mulligan across all ranks. I've already talked about that in my last video, but yeah. And then we have Soul Barrage. I think Soul Barrage is the most broken card in Discard Warlock. Yes, other cards like Chamber or Imp are more powerful, but Soul Barrage is the reason Discard Warlock is like an actual archetype now. Yeah, Discard Warlock has been good at, like, a couple other points it's been, like, okay, and it's been able to do stuff, right? It's typically just off the fact that, like, Discard Warlock could get a lot of stats on board really early and then draw a lot of cards, and then that was kind of what it was good for. But now that we have Soul Barrage, Discard Warlock fights for board incredibly well, because Soul Barrage is a 5-mana spell. Whenever you play or discard this, deal 6 damage randomly split among all enemies. What that means is, if you discard it and your opponent has a board, you're going to kill their board. Or if they don't have a board, you just dealt 6 fucking damage to their face. When Cataclysm was still 4 mana, the actual Discard Warlock would run as many copies of Soul Barrage and Fist of Draxus as possible. And we'll talk about Fist of Draxus. And the entire thing was to just get as many copies as possible through some cards that we'll talk about soon, play Cataclysm, and then kill your opponent because you cleared their board, so Soul Barrage and Fist of Draxus would always go face. And this would happen on, like, turn 4 or 5. In 2023. It was nerfed in, like, January of 2023, I want to say. So it was more 2022, but this is recent. It's still very recent. Discard Warlock Discard Warlock, I don't even know what to say, man. Like, how can you print a card like Soul Barrage and not think something will go wrong? Soul Barrage is that it factor for Discard Warlock. Now that Soul Barrage exists, as if they get one really, really good card to break it, it will be the best card in the deck again. And, like, what can you do about it? There's nothing you can do, because Soul Barrage, like, Soul Barrage is easy to hit because it's a high-cost discard spell, which, you know, lends itself to Expired Merchant. At this point, I might as well go talk about the other cards that are really strong, but I wouldn't consider broken, because I'm going to be talking about them a lot. We have a lot of very strong support. I've already talked about Fist of Draxus, so let's finish it here. It is a 4-mana spell. When you play or discard this, deal 4 damage to a random enemy. So, Fist of Draxus, you could actually copy it with the card Grave Defiler. It was a 1-mana, 2/1 Battlecry, add a copy of a Fel spell to your hand. Fist of Draxus, guess what, is a Fel spell. Or a Fel spell, add a copy of a Fel spell in your hand, sorry. So, what that meant is you would play Grave Defilers to get as many Fists of Draxus as possible. You'd play Expired Merchant, which is a 2-mana, 1/2 undead. Battlecry, discard your highest cost card. Death Rattle, add 2 copies of it to your hand. So, you play Expired Merchants to discard Soul Barrage, and not only would it trigger Soul Barrage, which was really good, but when it dies, it gives you more. So, you get a full hand of Fists and Soul Barrages, do the Cataclysm play like I already talked about, and it was disgusting. It was really, really disgusting. The thing is about Cataclysm as well, is that as long as you had Malchezaar's Imp on board and you played Cataclysm, you would draw every card that you played it with, because Imp and Cataclysm work favorably in a way you would like, which means all your other cards that have discard effects would also go off. So it wasn't even just you're holding Cataclysm just to play with the damage from hand. Another card that loved to be discarded in this way is Walking Dead. Is a 3-mana 2/5 undead with Taunt. If you discard this minion, summon it. Walking Dead, like, there were genuinely games where you would just play, like, coin Cataclysm on 3. You wouldn't even care about drawing that many cards because you are Warlock, so you can just tap and draw cards afterwards. And you would have, like, a bunch of Walking Deads, you would have a bunch of Silverware Golems, you would have a bunch of Boneweb Eggs, all just go off and win that way as well. Like, Walking Dead is a premiumly statted 3-mana 2/5 is premium stats, 3/4. 7 stats on a 3-drop is premium with Taunt and costs nothing. Yeah. And then we have the Solarium. The Solarium is easily one of the best 1-mana spells ever, just of all time. It's 1-mana shadow spell. Draw 3 cards. They are temporary. Temporary, of course, means discarded at the end of the turn. And yeah. So who could have guessed that a card that draws you 3 cards and discards them would be really good? There were genuinely arguments that you would just play Soul Barrage on one, or not Soul Barrage, sorry, Solarium on 1 and then pass. Like, that was like a real thing you could do. If you had like a not that great hand, typically that's what you would do. Usually, if you're going on turn 1, you would always play Malchezaar's Imp, or I guess Cobalt Librarian, that was in the deck as well. So, but if you didn't have a 1-drop, it was almost always correct to just play Solarium on 1. That's how powerful this card is, because what happens if you do just hit 2 Walking Deads and like a Silverware Golem? That's disgusting. It really was. absurdly disgusting. The thing about Discard Warlock is that the good cards have either like really good when discarded effects because they'll summon themselves or deal damage, and the good discard like cards are either hyper efficient like the Solarium or Cataclysm before it was nerfed, or Chamber of Miscellaneous, or they have targeting on their discards like Expired Merchant. Expired Merchant is so strong that you stopped running Hand of Gul'dan just to be able to duplicate your Soul Barrages. Speaking of Hand of Gul'dan, there are a lot of cards that obviously don't see play in Discard Warlock anymore. And that doesn't mean that they're necessarily bad cards, it just means that better cards have come out. Hand of Gul'dan, of course, is a 6-mana spell. When you play or discard this, draw 3 cards. If Hand of Gul'dan didn't cost 6 mana, I think that it would still obviously see play. I mean, I guess 5 mana draw 3 would be pretty good, but Soul Barrage being 5 mana is the reason Hand of Gul'dan didn't see play anymore after a while, because, well, if you're playing Soul Barrage in your deck, you want to get more copies of Soul Barrage from Expired Merchant. You don't want more copies of Hand of Gul'dan. That was already one of the biggest problems with Hand of Gul'dan anyway, is that getting more copies of it didn't matter because Discard Warlock has decent draw already, you know, because of Malchezaar's Imp. So this extra draw from Hand of Gul'dan, yeah, it was nice, but after a while, it just became better to have better cards in your deck. Nightshade Matron is a 4-mana 5/5 demon with Rush, Battlecry, discard your highest cost card. Nightshade Matron plus Hand of Gul'dan is one of the best, no, not one of, it just is the best discard combo to ever exist in Standard. You ran it in like every kind of Zoo deck that was around for Standard. Like Darkmoon Faire had a Zoo Warlock that ran it as like one of its best draw options, and I mean, it was good, it was really good, but you know, in Wild, you know, it didn't really catch on. Nightshade Matron got cut first, and then Hand of Gul'dan got cut in March of the Lich King with Soul Barrage, like I said. And, I mean, again, that doesn't necessarily mean the cards are bad. It just means that a lot of better stuff has come out. Then we get to Doomguard. Doomguard is such an iconic minion. It's from Classic. It's a 5-mana 5/7 demon with Charge, Battlecry, discard 2 random cards. Doomguard did not see that much play in Discard Warlock, like, all time, because, well, the era between like Discard Warlock being good to being broken, you know, it wasn't that good during that time, and Doomguard kind of just faded to obscurity somewhere in that era. I'm not quite sure where, I'm gonna be honest with you, because Discard Warlock, you know, it's seen plenty of different types of decks. You know, Cute Warlock is technically a Discard Warlock, and that wouldn't run Doomguard. But the original Ashes of Outlands Discard Warlock was all about running demons and using Canrathad to make your demons cost 1 less. And while Doomguard, Nightshade Matron, they're both demons. So there are a total of 6 nerfed cards in Discard Warlock since the archetype has come out in 2014. We of course can, I guess we could start in chronological order. We'll start with Soulfire. It was 0 mana, now it's 1 mana. Fire spell, deal 4 damage, discard a random card. Soulfire still sees play in a lot of Discard Warlock lists. Of course, it wasn't nerfed because it was a Discard Warlock card. It was nerfed because, well, it was 0 mana, deal 4 damage. And when you're using that to win the game, you don't really care about the discard effect anyway. But nowadays, you still are using it because it's 1 mana, deal 4, and discard a card. And that's really strong. Then there is Cataclysm, which was which of course, you know, was a 4-mana spell, discard or destroy all minions, discard your whole hand. You would draw a billion cards from an imp. You would discard all your stuff to get a lot of value. It was just really degenerate, like really, really degenerate. Then we have the big 3. These are the big 3 in my opinion of the nerf cards because, well, 2 of them were overbuffed. Dark Bargain was 6 mana and it was buffed to 3 mana. Now it's 4 mana. Destroy 2 random enemy minions, discard 2 random cards. On its own, yeah, it was strong. Do not get me wrong. Discarding 2 cards for 1 card is really good, and it destroyed minions. But the main reason it was broken is Tiny Knight of Evil. Tiny Knight of Evil was after it was buffed, 2 mana 3/2 demon. Whenever you discard a card, gain +2/+2. Are you starting to understand why Tiny Knight of Evil curving into Dark Bargain on 3 was really strong? You would destroy your opponent's 2 minions if they had any, and then give it +4/+4. And that's not balanced. You would scale out of control with Tiny Knights. You had Chamber, which would also help it scale out of control. And then we get to Chamber. Of course, I already mentioned it was a 2-mana, 3 durability location, but like, how can you describe how broken Chamber is? It had a 90% win rate in Mulligan across all ranks. It was actually 92% at one point. I mean, in Legend, it had like a 70% Mulligan win rate. No card has ever had a Mulligan win rate that high, by the way. Ever. And it was the best deck in the game. So that means it was also the most played deck in the game. And for it to have that high of a win rate is absolutely disgusting. And then there's Tome Tampering. So Tome Tampering was banned from Wild because of Soul Barrage specifically. It was a 3-mana, now it's 6-mana spell. Shuffle 1-cost copies of cards into your deck, or in your hand into your deck, then discard them. So basically, you would fill your hand with Soul Barrages and Grave Defilers, again, similarly to Cataclysm. Or, not Grave Defilers, sorry, Fell Barrage. What am I talking about? Fist of Draxus, similarly to Cataclysm. You play Tome Tampering and Malchezaar's Imp for a lot cheaper than Cataclysm, and then you would discard your whole hand, shuffle it back into your deck, and then draw a whole hand again of 1-cost cards, and then do it again. And then you just play your cards from hand, because they all cost 1. How utterly disgusting. How utterly disgusting. And, like, the thing is that Tome Tampering plus Malchezaar's Imp was not that good. Like, yeah, you could do it in Nathria, but when Soul Barrage came out, the one expansion later, March of the Lich King, that's what really broke this card. Like, it was considered not that good to play a 4-mana combo that would just make your whole hand cost 1. I guess not technically, because, you know, you would just draw some other cards, technically, but you get what I mean, right? It would make half your hand probably cost 1. And that wasn't considered that broken until it also dealt a billion damage. Insane. And, like, I think you guys have to understand, like, where I'm coming from, why I think Discard Warlock is terribly designed. You're technically paying a secondary resource, except actually your secondary resource is always an upside. So you're not paying for anything. Because, like, unless you low roll and hit the, like, 1 of 4 cards in your hand that doesn't want to be discarded, usually, almost always, you're very thankful for what you're getting discarded, and you're getting some kind of benefit from being discarded in another way. And then we have some new support cards that have come out since Discard Warlock was nerfed in around, like, October, or, like, September-ish of 2023. So we have cards like Furnace Fuel and Clumsy Steward. Furnace Fuel, of course, is also technically destroyed card Warlock support, but it's a 3-mana fire spell. When this is played, discarded, or destroyed, draw 2 cards. Just 0-mana, draw 2. It's just really good. I mean, what more can you say? You obviously run this because it's just better than Hand of Gul'dan now, and it does the same thing Hand of Gul'dan did, but it isn't 6 mana, which is really good. And Clumsy Steward, a 3-mana 2/4. After any card is just drawn, make it temporary. So not only does Clumsy Steward hurt your opponent because it makes their cards temporary, but because temporary discards your cards at the end of the turn, you can play it with Imp and then discard cards. You'll draw more cards, and guess what? They'll get discarded at the end of the turn. It's actually really good. There are some decks where you use Plot Twist with Clumsy Steward and Imp to make it so your entire plot twisted cards all get discarded. And, like, yeah, you can hit a couple cards that don't want to be discarded, right? It happens, but Discard Warlock is... That's just the nature of Discard Warlock, is sometimes you hit cards you don't want discarded. Still, disgusting. It's so disgusting. I think that, like... I mean, like, I guess Clumsy Steward specifically isn't the best card ever, right? But I think if we get more powerful discard support, you're going to see this card more often. And I am not looking forward to that in the slightest. There are, of course, some cards that I haven't really talked about, right? They're not ultra powerful. They're not as good as some of the other cards. They don't really fit any of the other things, but they're still cards you put in the deck. They're still cards that you will consider over anything else that says discard on them. And the big thing is the Wicked Whisper's Bone Web Egg combo. Bone Web Egg, of course, is a 2-mana 0/2 with Death Rattle. Summon 2 1/1 spiders. If you discarded this, trigger its Death Rattle. And Wicked Whispers is 1 mana. Discard your lowest cost card. Give it your minions +1/+1. Wicked Whispers used to be, like, really, really good with Bone Web Egg, but as time went on, you know, the combo it's gotten worse, not because it's bad, but because better cards have been printed. And like, it's not the easiest to hit a 2-mana card anymore because you run a couple of 1-mana cards, and a lot of your 1-mana cards don't want to be discarded, which make Wicked Whispers a little bit worse, but that doesn't mean it's a bad card. Scourge Supplies is 3 mana, draw 3 cards, choose 1 to discard. Crazy, I know. Wow, 3 mana, draw 3 cards with an upside? Like, what? I get that it's from March of the Lich King, and March of the Lich King, of course, was trying to support Discard Warlock for Standard and make it playable in Standard. It didn't, of course, because Discard Warlock has never actually been playable in Standard. But to say, like, this card is well designed as well is so dumb, because not only do you get to pick which card gets discarded, but because you get to pick, you can, like, set it up a lot better. You can set up your hand for, like, hey, I'm going to be discarding, or like, oh, I can know which cards I'm going to draw based on, like, how many cards are in my deck, and again, the likelihood, and you'll typically be able to pick what you want, because, well, you're already drawing so many cards that when you play Scourge Supplies, you'll have, like, half of your deck by that point, so it's a lot more likely to know what you want to be discarded, and again, you do get to pick. Then there's Silverware Golem. 3 mana, 3/4. If you discard this minion, summon it. It used to be a 3/3. Silverware Golem has just been a staple in Discard Warlock forever. You know, it's from Karazhan, same as Malkazar's Imp, and you've run this in Discard Warlock ever since, like, actually, I don't think you'll ever not, or have ever not run this in Discard Warlock. It's just too good. And, like, yeah, it's not as good as cards that come out nowadays, right? Like, the 3 mana, 2/5 a taunt is just objectively better than Silverware Golem. But that doesn't mean Golem is a bad card. It's still great. I don't think I would cut this if I were to make a Discard Warlock deck. I really don't. I'm not going to. I hate Discard Warlock. It's one of my least favorite archetypes ever. And it was broken 3 times in the span of a year. It was the best deck in the game 3 times in the span of the year. What? But yeah, that's gonna be it from me. If you guys enjoyed, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Tell me what you think down below. What do you guys think is the worst designed archetype in the game? I really do think it is Discard Warlock, and I would argue it. I genuinely will, but other people have different opinions. What do you guys think is the worst? I would like to know. I don't think I can really do a video like this on the best stuff, because that's even more subjective in my opinion, saying like that would just be my favorite at that point, but gosh, Discard Warlock isn't even my least favorite archetype. It's just the one that I think is the most poorly designed. Anyway, I will see you guys next time. If you enjoyed, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. I'll see you guys later. Peace.
Shadows are rising again!
Darker than they've ever been. As evil descends from the skies, the world cries out, how will we survive? Out of the hall of explorers, and up from the dusty tomb, they grab their whips and fedoras. These legends are the